All right, welcome back to our special topics in media studies course. We are in night 2, week 2 of this emphasis on future shock in science fiction film. As we examined last week, there are a number of ways in which you can encounter future shock. And so each time we visit a film, we're looking to ask that question of engagement, of what does it mean in this context? How does a film portray elements of future shock? And ultimately, we're formulating ideas about how that can help us understand not just the language of film, which film language is a form of mass communication of itself, but understand the different ways that we develop and express message strategies. And in this particular case, what do the message strategies represent as they relate to future shock? All right, well, to set things up, tonight we're going to be examining a film. This will be the earliest film in our 21st century film collection for this course, released in 2007 from director Francis Lawrence, I Am Legend. Now, I Am Legend is actually a remake of a film that was a remake of a previous film that was based on a novel. And so this has not only a historical literary association, but also it is of several works on the central topic. And so I believe the first iteration of the film was referred to as The Last Man on Earth, and it came out in the mid-50s, starring Vincent Price of Roger Corman horror fame. And then about almost between 15 and 20 years later, they remade it again as The Omega Man, starring none other than Charlton Heston. He was getting into his graying age, kind of waning as a heavyweight leading man star. But he had a very interesting final arc to his lead performance career, for which that film is an entry point that's it's a curious entry. Well, fast forward another couple of decades, almost 40 years, and there had been producers, developers working on a way to bring I Am Legend to the screen once again. I believe at one point it was attached to the likes of Arnold Schwarzenegger, I think James Cameron, director of Aliens, The Abyss, Titanic, Avatar, and so on, had his hands on it at some point, and kind of gets pushed around. Well, ultimately, it's because the nature of this film is really what we consider a star vehicle. It is a film that's built around a kind of singular performance. You're going to see some various interactions in some forms or fashions, and I hate to get into the details too much, but this is a kind of showpiece for what is starting to become a bygone style of filmmaking in Hollywood, which is centering a film around a movie star. All right, so in this case, still in a safe space in a respective career, we have Will Smith in the lead for I Am Legend. He's coming off a very lucrative career that was able to transcend different mass mediums. Of course, beginning as a comedian slash kind of musical entertainer, and then had a mid-level sitcom hit on NBC for a number of years, and then was able to parlay that into a career as a blockbuster staple with enormous summer hits like Independence Day from Roland Emmerich, Men in Black, and others. But as things happen, as the Hollywood map unfolds, right, for so many of these stars, diversification was necessary. And he began to experiment more with some dramas and comedies and that sort of thing. So here we have a post-apocalyptic science fiction film. And we're hitting it at this point in the course for a key reason. Last week, as we examined Greenland, it was significant to consider a starting point that would represent an entrance point, a collective entrance point in which we emerge with the performers into an apocalyptic encounter. And this week we're going to fast forward, jump ahead, a future shock jump, if you will, to the post-apocalyptic, where this film will very quickly drop us in. So let's tie it into the readings, and then let's preview some key themes that we want to be on the lookout for as we're examining what we're considering a future shock text. And so, of course, we're returning to Toffler and this work, again, not a book about film, a sociological work that is showing its age. You'll find there's some datedness elements, but that's kind of part of the dance. That's kind of part of the fun of taking the ideas he's working with as a futurist and then locating how and where we see these ideas coming into fruition within the fictional framework of these film texts. And so a couple of chapters that I feel like gravitate toward themes within this film include his chapter 9, focus on the scientific trajectory, as well as his chapter 17 on coping with tomorrow. And I love that title because this is definitely a film that is coping with tomorrow. Well, on the other hand, we have our newest book to be released, and this is from, of course, Michael Harris, Come With Me If You Want to Live, The Future as Foretold in Classic Sci-Fi Films. And Harris has a wonderful chapter. It's the third entry in this first edition. Oh, wouldn't it be great if I was crazy? Then the world would be okay. No one believes the plague-ridden future of 12 monkeys could actually happen. And in this chapter, Harris is writing about the hit movie from Terry Gilliam, arguably his largest hit of his long career, 12 Monkeys from the mid-1990s, a film about biological plagues gone awry. And so while that chapter is about that mid-90s film, its motif is a nice carryover for the feature we're going to look at tonight. And so finally, we're working our way through understanding not just future shock, but a broader appreciation for the science fiction film genre. And so walking us through that broader genre, of course, is Keith M. Johnson's science fiction film, A Critical Introduction, from Bloomsbury. First edition was in 2013, and there have been some updates since. But this film, or rather this book, we're looking at a couple of chapters that are just going to help walk us through over the next couple of weeks the historical periods of science fiction's formation. So there'll be a lot of throwback titles referenced in that chapter. That's okay. It's okay if you haven't seen them or maybe even heard of them. In fact, it can be a great introductory point. But that's a way to help walk us through the stages of a film genre's life cycle. And as we get into this film, let's look at some weekly themes that we want to take into consideration. The first would be a post-apocalyptic wasteland. Now, there are different kinds of post-apocalyptic wastelands that you could find in certain dystopian cinema. Sometimes it might be a barren wasteland, not unlike a wilderness setting, if you will. The likes that we see in the Mad Max movies, A Boy and His Dog, and so on. But in this case, what happens when the post-apocalyptic wasteland is represented by urban spaces, right? The cityscape itself. And how does that get juxtaposed from the way we associate the busyness and hectic life cycles that take place in our cities and megacities today? Well, the next one to look out for, and I've already connected this to a primary reading, is biological plagues, right? Plagues would be an apropos connective point for us. It is certainly a theme as old as time immemorial, right? In terms of registering concern and activating fear in our experiences, in our storytelling, in our imaginary. And so an updated, right, 20th, 21st century variation on this includes not simply biowarfare, that would be misleading, but biological plagues as perhaps accidental, like what happens if we stumble into an apocalypse. Well, once again, we're returning to the theme of resource scarcity because this film supposes a future in which things are dire And I think one of the virtues of the approach in this film is the limitation on how much information they give you. I get that could create impatience on the part of the audience, like, tell me more, fill in all the blanks. But for the medium of film, as a focused storytelling unit, it can be valuable to have ideas shown or presented impartial to us without having all the answers. And so I encourage you to work that through as we watch the feature. A carryover again, Death of Permanence. That was a chapter title from Toffler that we discussed a little bit last week. And the Death of Permanence is definitely a through line, I think, in so many of these tales of apocalyptic futures, because they're imagining what happens when our status quo ceases to progress. And then I've added something just as almost a question mark, a tease, if you will, and that is this idea. It's a new idea of mad science, right? And the less I say there, the better. But I'm just hyphenating these words together to say I feel like something's up in that vein. Well, let's look at some film focus themes as we wind down and get set for this feature film. Given the context of the movie, 2007, we're in the height of the post 9/11 war on terror, right? And so war has been brimming following a catastrophic assault on a major city, same city depicted in this film. And so what we saw from about 2005 to 2010, 2012 was a continuous barrage of imagery about assaults on cities. And there's something curious in the air with that. And so when we think about a film and the context of its time, it can be valuable to remember some of the key elements in play at that time. So consider the possibility of post 9/11 dread as a kind of specter weighing over this film. Once again, it is a film focused on survivalism, but in this instance, there is also this situational isolationism. Isolationism is also interesting when thinking about post 9/11 dread, because one of the key ideological tensions we found was that in the West we privilege certain isolationist policies and tendencies that may not gel well with the larger global community in certain forms and fashions. And so just a theme to consider. And the role that isolationism is playing, maybe even in the headspace, the psyche of this character. Well, on that front, sometimes with other maybe wasteland wandering narratives, you might get a hero or anti-hero's journey, right? In the case of Mad Max, maybe Furiosa, an inversion of that. But here, once again, this curious, this trickster hyphen that or a dash that I've included. Sorry about that. But this, what are we dealing with ultimately? Are they heroic assumptions or anti-heroic assumptions? And these are just terms to dwell on as we enter the text. And then finally, I find a fascinating tension between civilization and wilderness, right? In civilization, historically, we tend to ascribe a lot of virtues to war. We tend to reflect and represent elements that privilege civilization, the accomplishments of what we've done, versus the ambiguities and the uncertainties and the dangers that lie in wilderness. That's baked into the American heritage, right? Even so far back as the Pilgrim experience, the expansion of the West, and so on. And here we see it continue in post-apocalyptic narratives as well. So here we have it from 2007, I Am Legend, starring Will Smith. We will check this film out and then look forward to your thoughts and observations.